Eat an almond and chew it really well. It was the sentence heard around the world. When a supermodel's mother said those words to her starving daughter, the internet laughed. It became a meme. We called them Almond Moms. We made TikToks about hiding snacks, about the passive-aggressive comments at Thanksgiving dinner, about the obsession with being light as a feather. But for millions of people watching those clips, the laughter died in their throats, because for them, this wasn't a joke, it was a flashback. Imagine a house where the fridge is pristine, filled with organic greens and expensive waters, yet you feel a constant, gnawing starvation. Not just a physical hunger, but a psychological one. You grow up learning that food is not fuel, it is the enemy. You learn that your appetite is a wild beast that must be caged. And the zookeeper holding the key? It's the person who is supposed to love you the most, your mother. We tend to think of abuse as bruises, as shouting, as chaos. But there is a silent violence that happens in the suburbs, in the immaculate kitchens of good families. It is the violence of the glance, the scan. The way her eyes dart to your waistline when you walk into the room before they meet your eyes. It is the heavy sigh when you reach for a second slice of bread. It is the relentless pursuit of an aesthetic disguised as concern for your health. This is not just about diet culture. That is too simple. What we are dealing with is a multi-generational curse. It is a trauma that has been passed down like a family heirloom, from grandmother to mother to you. It is the story of women who were taught that to be small was to be safe, that to be empty was to be pure. Today, we are not just reacting to a meme. We are performing an autopsy on the Almond Mom phenomenon. We will uncover the dark psychology of the mother who views her child's body as her own property. We will look at the neuroscience of how this specific type of emotional neglect rewires your brain for anxiety and addiction. And most importantly, we will find out if it is possible to break a chain that has been forged over decades. Put down the almond. We need to talk about the hunger. To understand the Almond Mom, we have to stop looking at her as just mean or strict. We have to look at the machinery of her mind. Psychologists have identified a specific dynamic in these relationships, and it often centers around a concept called narcissistic extension. In a healthy parent-child relationship, the child is seen as a separate individual with their own autonomy. But for the Almond Mom, the child is not a person, the child is a mirror. You are an extension of her ego. When you look perfect, which in her mind means thin, disciplined, and restrained, she feels successful. She feels validated. But if you gain weight, if you indulge, if you look messy, she doesn't just see your body, she sees her own failure. She feels a deep personal shame. Her criticism of you is actually a defense mechanism to protect her own fragile self-esteem. This is often rooted in what we call internalized misogyny. Many of these mothers came of age in the 90s and early 2000s, the era of heroin chic and Victoria's Secret angels. It was a time when the media relentlessly brutally attacked women's bodies. Your mother internalized the message that a woman's only currency is her beauty, and her beauty is defined by her smallness. So, in a twisted, tragic way, her control is a form of love. She thinks she is equipping you for survival. She believes the world is cruel to fat people, which, admittedly, it often is, and she thinks she is saving you from that cruelty by being the first one to bully you. She breaks you down at the dinner table so the world can't break you down later. It is a protective abuse. Furthermore, we must discuss the mechanism of projection. The Almond Mom is often living in a state of constant deprivation herself. She is hungry, she is tired of counting calories. When she sees you eating with freedom, eating with joy, it triggers a primal envy in her. She cannot allow you to have the freedom she denies herself. She becomes the food police. But unlike a police officer who enforces the law, her laws are constantly changing. One day, fruit is good, the next day, it has too much sugar. This inconsistency is a key part of the manipulation. It keeps you on edge, constantly seeking her approval, constantly checking the scale to see if you are worthy of love today. This creates a conditional love environment. You learn that love is not something you are born deserving, it is something you rent with your compliance and your calorie count. And the rent is due every single meal. Let's step into a real-world scenario. Let's talk about a woman named Sarah. Sarah is 28 years old. She is a successful architect living in Chicago. She is independent, smart, and capable. But the moment she walks through the door of her childhood home for Thanksgiving, she reverts to being a frightened 12-year-old girl. The manipulation starts before dinner is even served. It's the passive-aggressive greeting. Her mom opens the door, hugs her, pulls back, scans her body up and down, and says, "Oh, you look healthy." Is the city stress making you eat more takeout? Notice the word choice. Healthy in the Almond Mom dictionary is a loaded term. It's a polite code for larger than I accept. During dinner, the warfare continues. It's not loud screaming, it's subtle. It's what psychologists call microaggressions. When Sarah reaches for the mashed potatoes, her mom doesn't slap her hand. Instead, she sighs. A long, audible exhale. Then she says to the room at large, "I read an article that said white carbs are basically glue for your intestines, but you enjoy it, honey." Suddenly, the food turns to ash in Sarah's mouth. The joy of the meal is gone. Shame floods her system. But here is where the intergenerational part comes in. Sitting at the head of the table is Sarah's grandmother. And throughout the meal, the grandmother is picking at Sarah's mom. "Linda, your skin looks tired. Are you drinking enough water? You know sugar gives you wrinkles." Sarah watches her mother shrink. She sees her mother, the terrifying tyrant of her childhood, suddenly become a small, insecure daughter trying to please her own mother. This is the legacy of hunger. Sarah realizes that her mother is just a link in a chain of pain. Her mother was taught to hate herself, so she taught Sarah to hate herself. It's a tragedy performed in 3 acts, right there at the dinner table. Later that night, Sarah finds herself in the kitchen when everyone is asleep. She eats leftovers cold from the fridge, shoveling food into her mouth rapidly, almost without chewing. This is the binge. It is the direct rebellion against the restriction. And the next morning, the guilt will consume her, completing the cycle that her mother started. Sarah's story is not unique. It is the story of millions of American households where the family bond is cemented by a shared eating disorder. So what is actually happening inside Sarah's brain? Is she just sensitive, or has she been physically altered by this upbringing? Neuroscience gives us a terrifying answer. The brain of a child raised by an almond mom is wired for scarcity. When a child is constantly restricted from food or shamed for eating, the brain perceives a threat to survival. Evolutionarily, our brains are designed to keep us alive during a famine. When you diet or restrict heavily, your brain doesn't know you are trying to fit into a prom dress. It thinks you are in a desert with no food. This triggers the famine response. The brain increases the production of ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and decreases leptin, the fullness hormone. It also heightens your reward response to high-calorie foods. This is why almond daughters often struggle with binge eating in adulthood. It is not a lack of willpower, it is a biological survival override. Your brain is screaming, "Eat everything now, because the famine is coming back." But the damage goes deeper than appetite. It affects the HPA axis, the body's stress response system. Living under the constant scrutiny of a critical parent keeps a child in a state of chronic hypervigilance. You are always walking on eggshells. This floods the developing brain with cortisol. Over time, high levels of cortisol can actually shrink the hippocampus, responsible for memory and emotion regulation, and enlarge the amygdala, the fear center. This means that as an adult, you are physiologically wired for anxiety. You become hyper-aware of other people's moods. You are an expert at reading micro-expressions because, as a child, knowing if mom was in a fat-shaming mood or a happy mood was a matter of emotional survival. We also see the impact on the insula, the part of the brain connected to interoception, the ability to feel what is happening inside your body. Children of almond moms are taught to ignore their body's signals. You ignore hunger because mom says it's not time to eat. You ignore fullness because you must finish the healthy food. Eventually, the connection between the brain and the body is severed. You lose the ability to trust your own gut, literally and figuratively. You become a floating head, disconnected from your physical self, viewing your body not as a home, but as a project that is constantly failing. So, here is the million-dollar question. Can you rewire a brain that has been programmed for self-hatred? The answer is yes, but it requires a rebellion. Healing from the almond mom trauma requires a process called reparenting. You have to become the mother to yourself that you never had. First, you must identify the introject. That critical voice in your head telling you that you shouldn't eat the pasta, that is not your voice. That is your mother's voice echoing in your subconscious. When you hear it, talk back to it. Literally. Say, I hear you, but I am an adult and I choose to nourish my body. Second, you must practice intuitive eating. This is the radical act of trusting your body again. It means eating when you are hungry and stopping when you are full without moral judgment. There are no good foods or bad foods. Food is neutral. It takes time, but you can rebuild the bridge between your brain and your body. Third, and this is the hardest part, you must set boundaries. You cannot change your mother. She may never understand, she may be trapped in her own cycle forever, but you can change how you interact with her. You are allowed to say, Mom, I am not discussing my diet with you. If you comment on my body, I will leave the room. And then, you must actually do it. You are not responsible for healing your mother's trauma. You are only responsible for not passing it on to the next generation. To all the Almond daughters watching this, the cycle ends with you. You have the power to turn that famine into a feast of self-love, acceptance, and freedom. If this video resonated with you, if you saw your own story in Sarah's, please leave a comment below. Share your story. Let's break the silence together.